Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning. Hope you enjoyed the opening keynote with Peter Cheese and Ollie Howard. I'm Kaylee Tobel, and my role is to connect with members, non-members, and various communities in Northern England. And it's my pleasure to be hosting today's session. As mentioned by Peter and Ollie, as a people professional, it's important to understand how the profession adapts in response to a forever changing world. And part of that is also understanding how the profession has already changed and adapted to various challenges which have already been overcome. So during this session, we're going to discuss the story of the profession, looking at its growth and evolution over the past 10 years and how that has led to its current state and what comes next in terms of challenges and opportunities. Thenny and Jake will also discuss the Good Work Index, which is the CIPD's annual benchmark of job quality, and outline practical steps people professionals can take to improve the working lives of employees. So without further ado, I'd therefore like to introduce my colleagues who will be guiding us through today's session. So we've got Thenny Paramarguru, Senior Advisor on the People Profession from CIPD, and we've got Jake Young, who is Senior Policy and Practice Advisor for Employee Experience, OD and L&D for CIPD. So over to you both, and looking forward to today's session.
Great. Thank you, Kaylee. Thanks for that introduction. So as Kaylee said, thank you everyone for joining. It's great to see you all. I'm a senior advisor for the people profession at the CIPD as part of the policy and practice team. Today, I am going to be talking through a series that I've been working on, which is currently due to be released later in the year. And it's all about the evolution of the profession. In January, we held a roundtable with senior professionals which helped to inform the content for this series, alongside broader research, including the CIPD's own reports. So today, we're going to start by looking at some of the key challenges that people professionals are currently managing. We will then spend most of our time looking at the developments of the profession over the past 10 years as a way of hopefully providing some context and gaining better understanding of how these changes have influenced the current working environment. And finally, we will have a look at how the profession may develop in the near future. So to start off with, it would be great if you can go to the Q&A section of this session and use that just to answer this question. So really, we'd like to get your thoughts on what you think or you have experience of in terms of your own work are some of the challenges that are facing HR teams and people professionals in the current working climate. Please feel free to enter a brief response in the chat, even if it's just a couple of words. Okay, great. So I'll give it a few more moments just so that we can see things coming through, because I think there is a bit of delay on the Q&A bit. Very great. So I can see, some great responses coming through. So we've got AI impact, recruitment and retention, remote working, trying to balance ethical principles and company demands. That's a really good one. People needs and business need balance, inclusion and diversity. Yeah, these are some really pressing issues, and it matches with what we heard from senior professionals as well when we were speaking to them earlier this year. So a lot of the responses that I can see coming through resonate with some of the key themes we've got on this slide. The first challenge we noted from our work was the increasing remit of HR. There are a lot of factors we could mention here. A couple of examples are things like managing and implementing remote working policies, which a couple of you mentioned, and also the prioritization of workplace well-being, both of which have increased the remit and responsibilities of HR teams. Secondly, you can see on the slide, of course, in many countries, and particularly in the UK, the economic environment is quite unstable at the moment, meaning that companies are having to consider redundancies. You may have seen that in the latest UK labour market outlook from the CIPD, that 1 in 4 employers are planning redundancies in the next 3 months, which is the highest level in a decade outside of the pandemic. this necessarily impacts the workload and responsibilities of people professionals. And finally, there is also an ongoing political debate that surrounds the profession. A couple of you mentioned inclusivity and diversity. And most recently, the criticisms of the profession has been around the rejection of DEI policies and targets, particularly by companies with a US presence. So, with all of these current challenges in mind, over the next few slides, we'll be going through some of the key changes in the world of work. And what I'm going to try and do is provide some context to the challenges the profession faces today. So, based on the conversations that we had with senior leaders and broader research, we divided some of the key developments over the past decade into 4 categories. These are the advanced pace of change and digital transformation, changing values around work and the expectations of employees, increased efforts to support equality and removing barriers for underrepresented groups, and then finally, the pandemic response and the heightened need for wellbeing support alongside hybrid working options. And we'll now go through each of these changes in turn. So, to start off with, the advanced pace of change and digital transformation over the last 10 years has obviously had a significant impact on the role of people professionals. When technology is introduced, people professionals can be key in enabling change within organisations. For example, by facilitating the adoption of new OD requirements, alongside increased L&D support to encourage the adoption and engagement with new technology. As the pace of change increases, this also heightens the level of support people professionals need to provide. And then if we go to the second box on the right there, technological advancements have also changed how HR itself operates. Some organisations, for example, use digital tools to carry out pre-employment checks, and you can see a quote from one of our leaders on the right. We have also seen examples from organisations using internal HR chatbots to deal with more basic HR inquiries from employees. HR professionals are also collecting a lot more people data and insights, which can be essential to making evidence-based decisions. However, there is an increased risk that the volume of data available to professionals can lead to an overload of information, which isn't always helpful. So, moving on to the next change around changing values around work and the expectations of employees. What's important to employees as they navigate their careers has also changed alongside what they have come to expect from employers. There is some research to suggest that employees want to work for organisations with values that align to their own. Our flexible working report from 2023 also highlighted that access to flexible working was one of the key deciding factors for employees when considering a job move. Results from our GWI last year, however, show that since 2021, how people relate to work is increasingly being driven by money. Therefore, trends around how employees relate to work are nuanced and need to be viewed as part of a broader picture. These developments in employee preferences demonstrate how people professionals have a complex task when it comes to recruiting and retaining the best talent. Jake will talk more about the GWI and work centrality in the second part of this presentation. Another way that the workplace has developed over the past decade is in the increased efforts towards removing barriers for underrepresented groups. In the past 10 years, as you can see on the left, there have been a number of legislative changes within the UK and Europe, combined with social movements, both which have increased the necessity and desire of organisations and leaders to create equality within their working environments. When it comes to creating inclusive workplaces, it is often people professionals that hold responsibility for designing and implementing the interventions required to achieve this goal. And whilst we are seeing a political backlash gain momentum against DEI policies, it will take time to really understand the extent to which this narrative will uphold and whether it will have a long-term impact on if and how leaders seek equality within their organisations. And next up, and finally, we have the pandemic response and the heightened need for wellbeing support alongside hybrid working options. The increased awareness around mental health, particularly since the pandemic, has made it clear that there is a business case for promoting good mental health at work. You can see the findings from a 2019 Health Education England report on the right, which outlines the financial impact that mental ill health can have not only to organisations, but also to individuals themselves, with employees with mental health conditions more likely to lose their jobs. Whilst not all wellbeing perks promoted by organisations are effective, there are examples of where well-designed interventions have made a difference. And you can find a lot more detail and specific case studies in the health and wellbeing area on the CIPD website. The Health and Wellbeing Report of 2023 also demonstrates the extent to which absence in the UK workforce is driven by ill health, with mental ill health being the highest driver of long-term absence. Inclusive wellbeing strategies delivered by people professionals are therefore key to creating an environment where individuals can perform at their best. Developing such interventions have become even more complex since the pandemic, with wellbeing initiatives seeking to address hybrid working options too. And here on this slide, we can see that providing flexible working options is providing flexible working options and remote working options are both key when employees consider a new job, and is also viewed as a way of supporting the well-being of the workforce. Both women and those with long-term health conditions were more likely to report that flexible working and remote working options were important to them, which demonstrates how adopting an inclusive approach to where and when people work is key to attracting a broad pool of talents. And finally, what does this all mean for the future of the people profession? We'll be starting our research soon on this part of the report. However, based on our current understanding and awareness of the profession, there are a few themes that we've highlighted here that will likely impact the development of the profession in the future. People professionals will play a key role in enabling the adoption of AI across the workforce and encouraging employees to adopt new ways of working that could help them in their roles. There is also a need, however, to do this in a responsible way, for example, by taking an inclusive approach to adoption that recognises that employees will be starting from very different stages of AI adoption. Responsible use of AI is also really important when being used in processes like recruitment, where there has been a lot of discussion around the biases that AI could perpetuate. So it is important to strike a balance between embracing the technology and using it where it's needed, but doing so critically and ensuring that legal and ethical considerations are made. There will also likely be an increased need for analysts within people teams. As we are able to gather more workforce data, we need people with the right skills to ensure that this data is being analysed appropriately to make evidence-based decisions within the workplace. And finally, as more process-based tasks become automated, this may allow people teams to spend more time on the strategic elements of HR without having to dedicate so much of their resource to time-consuming administrative tasks. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I'll post some links and resources in the chat so you can refer to these if you want more information on some of the reports I've referenced. And I'll do that in the Q&A section of the chat too, so you have that in this stream. I'll now hand over to Jake to talk a little bit more about the GWI.
Perfect. Thank you, Theni. Hopefully everybody can now see my slides. Looks like it. Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Theni. That was a really great session. So yeah, I'm Jake Young. I am part of the policy and practice team at the CIPD, and I will be talking in this second half of the session about our Good Work Index, talking about some of its components, some themes and trends that we see over the years, as well as some solutions for people professionals and managers. So I'll get on to the links between Theni's presentation, trying to sort of align what she said with some of the patterns that we see in employee experience. But quickly, I wanted to outline the purpose and the methodology of the Good Work Index for those who aren't aware of it. So what is the CIPD's Good Work Index? So it's our annual benchmark of job quality in the UK. And what it does is it sees us survey over 5,000 workers who vary by things like age, gender, ethnicity, sector, region, etc. Every year we survey them throughout the UK. And our survey asks them about key aspects of their employment to help drive improvement in working lives. So why should we do this? Why use an employee survey to measure job quality? Well, measuring job quality is increasingly acknowledged as really important and central to assessing employment itself, and our relationship to our work, and how these things impact our lives and how improvements can be made to working lives where possible. So to put it simply, to try and improve working lives, we really have to understand what job quality means, and how its different dimensions are perceived by staff. So the Good Work Index also provides a view of the current state of work in the UK. So that means each year we're able to highlight areas of work that may be particularly timely, relevant or important for the HR profession or for employees generally. So for example, last year we had a real focus on interpersonal conflict at work. A few years ago, we focused on the cost of living crisis. But what the Good Work Index can also do is have a longitudinal aspect. So we survey some participants each year. They fill in the survey, meaning that we're able to track trends and patterns over time. And finally, the representative data from the UK that we get from this can not only be used by academics to further their research and kind of get a mutual benefit from that for us as well, but we can send it over to employers who can use the data to benchmark and use against the employees within their organizations. And the work of the GWI clearly links to our purpose, which is championing better work and working lives. And it aims to provide people professionals with really solid evidence-based resources to support their staff throughout their employment. So quickly then, if we want to have a quick go into the Q&A section, I want to pose the question: what does good work mean to you? So what kind of elements do you think make up good work? What are kind of the most important things? When I say the words good work, what does that look like to you? I'll give you 30 seconds or so, because I know we're on a bit of a lag, but hopefully we'll get some interesting responses. I don't know if anything's come up because it's hard to tell because there've already been so many responses. Okay, nice. Looks like we're getting some new responses in. I'll take a look at those. So it looks like things like AI, new generation in the workplace, well-being, inclusion and diversity, remote working, training, fulfillment and growth. Yeah, these are all really good. Productivity, work-life balance. Yeah, absolutely right. Fair pay. Yeah, I mean, all of these resonate with how we define good work as well. So I'll show you what we look at when it comes to good work. So we basically look at good work under 7 key areas. I think that's 7. If I haven't actually shared it. There we go. So That's actually 6 points, but we do have 7 dimensions. So what we think about good work is that it should be fairly rewarded. It should give the means to securely make a living. It should provide opportunity to develop skills, a career, and ideally a sense of fulfillment, as mentioned in the chat. It allows for work-life balance. Again, that was mentioned. Supportive environment, constructive, effective relationships, gives people the voice and the choice they need to shape their working lives. It should be physically and mentally healthy for everybody, and also should be accessible to everybody. And these are factors that have been developed over several years, and these have a really strong evidence base behind them. So I'll just go and share with you these 7 dimensions, as I mentioned. So we've got pay and benefits, contracts, work-life balance, job design, the nature of work, relationships at work, voice and representation, health and well-being. So I think a good portion of those were mentioned there in the Q&A, so that's really good to hear. And these are the dimensions under which all the questions sit. So we've got a number of different questions in our survey under each of these 7 dimensions. And I'll just mention as well that we have all our reports on the CIPD website. So this has been running since 2018. We're currently going into the 8th year of running this. So we're currently working on data from 2025. So reports should be coming out in the summer. So let's have a look then at what the actual findings tell us. So I'm thinking about what Theni mentioned earlier and how the people profession has evolved. I wanted to look at some elements of work that should be of interest to people working within the HR people profession, and how they might kind of approach these issues. So one area that Theni mentioned is digital transformation and the changing pace of work. So I wanted to have a look at how people's work in an environment of digital working and working from home, particularly in relation to flexibility and autonomy. So you can see from this graph here, I'll try and kind of explain it a little bit. I realize there's quite a lot of numbers. So we can see here that 3/4 of staff from 2024. So most of this data I'll be showing you is from last year's GWI, which was 2024. So 3/4 of staff in 2024 feel they have the right digital tools to communicate with their team. Sorry. We unfortunately don't have pre and post pandemic findings on this, as we only began asking this question in 2021. But what we do find is that the number has remained pretty steady. What is perhaps not surprising, but is quite interesting, is that those who have worked from home in the last year are more likely than those who haven't to feel they have these digital tools. So this suggests that organizations who have provided their staff with the flexibility and autonomy to work digitally away from the office have also generally given them the digital resources to do so effectively. And linked to this, maybe not specifically about digital working, but thinking about flexible working. So this is again talking about different ways of working in the kind of new environment that we find ourselves in. We find that the majority of staff are comfortable taking a few hours off work to take care of personal matters in 2024 again. So this number has remained pretty steady over the years, but we do see that with more people working from home, doing so becomes much easier, which clearly indicates that allowing staff autonomy over how and where they work provides them with a greater work-life balance. And we also have some really good evidence that being given flexibility and autonomy over where, when, and how we work is associated with improved performance and well-being. And we also know that having autonomy is one key way that staff can help combat the risks associated with digital working, such as working long hours or feeling pressured to be kind of always on or always available at work. So how then can people professionals and people managers look to make the most of flexible working? So a few recommendations we'd give are, Firstly, allowing staff to work flexibly from the beginning of their employment and including this in job adverts to attract candidates. Making sure that staff are aware, of flexible working arrangements available to them, like job sharing and compressed hours, to explore how they can be implemented in traditionally non-flexible roles. Getting staff involved in the creation and implementation of those flexible working policies. And then related to this, staff need to feel like they have genuine permission to be autonomous at work. So something like creating a manifesto or a template should help normalize autonomy throughout the organization, as should senior leaders and managers role modeling those kind of behaviors. And finally, managers need to be trained, need to receive really good training on how they can support their teams who may be working in different ways. So next, let's think about the changing values of employees and what they look for in work, which is something that Theni mentioned earlier. So Theni shared a little bit of this, which was talking about the kind of centrality that people feel with their work. So I'm just going to go into a bit more depth on this. So one issue that's become really prevalent over the last few years is work centrality, as mentioned, which is the extent to which people feel work plays a central role in their lives. And both indicators that we have of this appear to have shifted since the pandemic, with staff more likely to feel that their job is simply for the money, simply for financial gain, while becoming less likely to work harder than they need to help their organization. So they're less likely to go the extra mile for their organization. So I think this can be interpreted in a few ways. So in one way, we could say that it's positive. So we don't want people's lives to be consumed by work, and we want them to gain fulfillment away from their working life. But on the other hand, this could point to a bit of a concerning shift away from people being engaged and fulfilled at work, and could eventually see people go down a slippery slope away from these kind of really fulfilling jobs and towards more mediocre work. Or on the other hand, another option is that it could simply point to a change in people's priorities since the pandemic, when, of course, people's lives and livelihoods were at risk. And organizations need to kind of understand and accept that for some people, it's okay for work to be less of a priority. It doesn't necessarily mean they're less engaged or they're working less hard. It's simply lower down the list of priorities. And our other findings would actually kind of back up that last point, I would say. So we see that people are generally engaged at work. So, for example, they feel enthusiastic. People feel immersed at work and feel like time is flying. And on the other hand, they're much less likely to feel negative emotions like boredom, feeling miserable, or under excessive pressure. And we also see that people generally find their jobs fairly to positively meaningful. So that's especially with regards to doing important work and useful work for their employer and getting a sense of achievement from their job. We do see that fewer respondents feel inspired at work or feel their work serves a greater purpose, but these are pretty high, lofty ambitions. So I think it's still positive that we see around half of people feeling this way. So these findings do suggest that people are generally engaged, fulfilled, get meaning from their work, they're motivated. So perhaps the shift of work becoming less central is not necessarily a negative one if people still find their work brings them positive experiences. So I think these findings do throw up quite an interesting conundrum for people professionals and as well as for line managers and employers. I don't want to kind of retread things too much, but we do see that people's priorities appear to have shifted in recent years, and work seems to play a smaller role, a less central role in people's lives. And yet, we see people showing really strong levels of engagement, as I said, motivation, and finding their work generally brings them meaning. So I'd say one key implication here is job design. So we should ensure staff find their job interesting, enjoyable, and meaningful, as this is likely to keep them engaged and subsequently boost their performance and well-being, even if their priorities have shifted. So how do we do this? I think boosting engagement and commitment requires really positive behavior from everybody in the organization. But we find from really solid evidence that several factors are often most important in doing this. So the first of these is thinking about job demands and resources. So providing staff with adequate resources, such as really positive support and feedback, which should help prevent job demands from becoming overwhelming. And people also need to feel cared for and valued, so that they feel a level of identification with their employer and are likely to go the extra mile as a result. And then finally, jobs need to be clearly defined so that employees understand their role and its expectations, and they can make full use of their skills. So finally, mentioning skills there, I'm quickly going to have a look at how employees are looking for their work to better develop their skills and their career prospects. So we can see that from the data here, we can see that most people feel their skills and qualifications are about right for their role. But there is still a decent chunk of people, so we see around 1/3 of staff who feel they are overskilled or overqualified for their work. So clearly, I think this means we need to think about giving people enough complexity and enough challenge in their jobs. We do see that perceptions of training and development opportunities look a little more positive. So we see that over half of staff feel they have the opportunity to develop skills in their role, and similar numbers of managers feel their training is adequate. But we also do see that only just over 1/3 feel their career prospects are good, which is obviously a pretty low number. Nevertheless, it is positive that, as you can see, from 2019 to 2024, in this 5-year period, all of these have taken a jump. Even if it is only a fairly small jump, it is positive that these areas do appear to be improving. So skill matches are really important because we see that staff are much more engaged. They enjoy better relationships and are more likely to want to stay in their job when they're able to use the full extent of their skills. On the other hand, mismatches of skills can cause things like psychological distress, lower satisfaction in their jobs, and greater desire to quit. So what can we do about that? How can we address the skills mismatches issue? So some really good examples include conducting a skills audit to understand the skills of everybody in the workforce, and this is key, obviously, to making the best possible use of everybody's skills. Excuse me. Next is thinking recruitment. So rethinking recruitment, sorry. So for example, removing qualifications and skills from the job criteria in a job ad if they're irrelevant for the role. And then finally, looking at how jobs are designed again. So thinking about team structures to identify areas where people's skills can be optimized. Okay, so that's all from me. Thanks very much for listening. My email's there if anybody wants to get in touch. But otherwise, well, of course, you can look over our various reports. But otherwise, I will pass back to Kaylee, who will oversee the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake and Thurnie. I think some really interesting discussion there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to some Q&A because we've had some really interesting questions that have come through in the chat so far. So the first question that I would like to come to you both is, and sorry we can't see who's actually submitted the questions today, but the person who has submitted, do you agree that excess pressure leads to more workplace conflict? I would like to go to Jake with that one first, please.
Oh, yes. I'm not muted, am I? Sorry. Do you agree that excess pressure leads to more workplace conflict? That's a great question. I don't know if I have the exact sort of, a 100% correct answer on that. But yes, I would imagine we did do, as I said, a lot of work on conflict in last year's Good Work Index. I will confess I don't have the kind of data and everything in my head, just off the top of my head. But as I said, so we did look at workplace conflict, and yes, I would imagine that these kind of negative feelings, things like excessive pressure, things like excessive workload, are definitely likely to be associated with greater interpersonal conflict at work. As I said, I don't have the numbers. I could definitely look back at the data and have a look. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that yeah, people who are feeling kind of under stress, feeling these kind of less positive emotions at work, I would say are much more likely to experience conflict in their work, whether that's with people in their team, with their managers. Their relationships are likely to suffer, and so yes, to answer things briefly, I would imagine that yes, that is likely to be the case.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Jake. And we need to be very careful as well of burnout in the
Yeah, of
workplace as
course.
well. One of the things that I'm hearing when I'm out and about and I'm speaking to our leaders within the people profession are that they are very, very conscious that there's a very thin line, that can sometimes be crossed into workplace burnout for colleagues. So whatever we can do, you mentioned there, Jake, in terms of well-being and how we can, make sure that there is a clear boundary between the work and the home life that is there as much as possible, and supporting colleagues with that.
Yeah.
Is particularly in the mental health support space, would be really, really welcomed. Fenny, do you have any thoughts on that question as well?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's been said. The only thing I'd add is that I think that's where we have to be really careful when we see these measures around kind of asking everyone to return back to work, or measures that are a bit more that when people kind of complain about well-being as being fluffy, when you see these, when you think about actually if you are going to increase the pressure on employees, that could lead to conflict, and therefore productivity will come down. So I think it's just um, making sure you see you kind of think about well-being within the context of not only the employees' well-being, but also what that means for performance as well. So I think it's important to view it in that lens.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in, if you don't mind, Kaylee, I think as I said, a lot of this does come down to things like autonomy and giving people like genuine freedom and permission to be flexible and work in ways that really suit them. Because as I said, we do have some really good research which suggests that people's well-being, or kind of risks to people's well-being, especially when they work in digital environments, but also in person. These risks are likely to be, or one of the best ways to kind of combat these is by providing people with a real level of autonomy. And that's, even as simple as having a kind of a block on their emails when they're out of office, or just taking flexibility through their calendar. So yeah, I think things like that are really important to protect people's well-being.
Thank you both, much appreciated. And it's worth highlighting as well, CIPD have resources and guides which are available for you to read about resolving workplace conflict as well. So if you would like, you would like the link on that, please reach out and we can let you know. Unless we've got a member of staff who's in the audience who can pop that in the chat for you. So thank you for that question. Great question. So the next one that I would like to come to, please, Denny and Jake, is: what is the one action that you'd recommend that people professionals take to prepare for the 3 changes that you believe will happen in the next few years? I'm going to give you a minute to digest that one, because I mean, probably
Yeah.
there's several actions that you could
Yeah.
take. But if there's one probably really pivotal action that you recommend to kind of future-proof and to prepare for those changes, what would you say that that would be? Can I come
I
to?
think from my,
Yeah.
oh, were you going to say something, Jake? Or?
No, you go ahead. I think.
Okay, yeah. So, I think from my perspective, it'd be investing in L&D. I think before jumping into kind of investing in any technology or anything like that, it's making sure that your workforce is ready for any changes. And as I said in the presentation, people are at very different stages, and also there's a shortage of the talent that's required. So if you can invest in L&D and upskill your workforce, you'll be in a much better position, because you won't have to be fighting for the talent out there, because you'll probably, I mean, without having the figures, but you will be spending a lot acquiring that talent. Whereas if you can invest that internally and make sure the skills that you have in your workforce are ready, the people that you have in your workforce are ready for new technology and are able to make the most of it, I think that is probably what I'd recommend if I could only recommend one.
Thank you. I know it's a tough one. We're just thinking about one. Thank you, Thenny. Jake, can I come to you, please, for your
Yeah,
view?
of course. I think Thenny, you gave a really good answer there. I don't know if it's like the most kind of important thing if kind of for everybody, but probably from my perspective, I go on about this a lot, so I'm going to be repeating myself, but I would say engaging with kind of the best available evidence and engaging in evidence-based practice is one thing that people professionals, I think, could really do, because I think we've seen good progress over the years on this, but I think there's still a lot more we can do. So I think that looks like kind of just people professionals taking small steps to better engage with evidence. So we've got loads of kind of guides and resources on how people can best do that. But I think the more people can engage with the best evidence, the better the knowledge base becomes in the profession. And as a result, the more respected it is as a profession. So yeah, I think taking those small steps to be more evidence-based and understand where the kind of information you're getting is coming from, using different resources or different sources, sorry, of evidence to kind of conduct your research. And yeah, taking those small steps, even things like just engaging with research papers, that's a really small step, early kind of thing that people can do to do that, and hopefully to improve the profession and make it much more respected, as I said.
Thank you, Jake. Okay, so I believe then we may be approaching the end of today's session. I think really that we could have gone on for a lot longer. We've got a lot of fantastic questions in the Q&A that we've not managed to come round to. But I just wanted to say thank you for your interaction today, everybody. And just a couple of kind of closing thoughts for you. Hope you found this session today useful. Please engage with us, check out the Good Work Index, have a little look and see what's in there in a little bit more detail. And thank you, Thenny, for, talking about the challenges to the profession and the opportunities that we can embrace going forwards, particularly in the, the AI and tech space, in the people space. So on behalf of Thenny, Jake and I, we hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. And please reach out to us if you have any further questions, thoughts or reflections following the sessions. We're more than happy to connect with you. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.